Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Young and the Restless channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The walls of Genoa City seem to close in tighter than ever as old obsessions, dangerous temptations, and fragile hopes collided beneath the surface of another emotionally charged day. Deep within the quiet corners of the Newman world, Nikki Newman carried a burden that looked almost too heavy for her to bear. The fear in her eyes was impossible to hide as she prepared for a painful conversation with Jack Abbott, knowing that once the truth left her lips, there would be no taking it back. Every mother carries nightmares about her children, but Nikki's had become horrifyingly real, and the weight of Nick Newman's spiraling addiction had begun to consume her from the inside out. There was heartbreak written into every hesitant breath she took, because revealing the truth about Nick's fentanyl struggle meant admitting just how close he had come to losing himself completely. And somewhere beyond the noise of Genoa City's endless drama, Nick stood trapped in a brutal war with his own cravings, fighting a battle no one could fully see. Nick's struggle was becoming darker with every passing hour, the temptation lingering around him like a shadow he couldn't outrun. Recovery was never simple, and for Nick, every moment felt like standing on the edge of a cliff while the storm raged below. The pull of the fentanyl continued whispering to him, promising relief while threatening destruction, and the conflict inside him was exhausting. One side of him desperately wanted to stay on the path toward healing, to prove that he could reclaim control before his addiction destroyed everything he loved. But another side, the side weakened by pain and desperation, kept urging him toward surrender. The emotional strain etched across his face reflected the unbearable pressure of trying to survive his own mind, and the people who loved him could only watch helplessly, terrified that one wrong moment might undo every ounce of progress he had fought for. As Nick wrestled with his demons, Nikki realized she could no longer carry this nightmare alone, and that realization pushed her directly toward Jack Abbott. When Nikki finally opened up to Jack, the moment carried a devastating emotional weight that seemed to silence the world around them. Jack understood addiction better than most people in Genoa City ever could, and the instant Nikki confessed what Nick had been going through, a deep sadness settled over the conversation. There was no judgment in Jack's eyes, only compassion and painful understanding, because he knew exactly how brutal recovery could become when someone stood on the edge between hope and collapse. Nikki's voice likely trembled as she admitted her fears, each word revealing the agony of watching her son suffer while feeling powerless to save him. For a mother like Nikki Newman, strength had always been part of her identity, but this situation stripped away even her ability to pretend everything was under control. Jack became a source of comfort in that moment, someone who truly understood the terrifying unpredictability of addiction and the emotional devastation it leaves behind. Yet even as Jack listened to Nikki's heartbreaking confession, another storm was brewing elsewhere in Genoa City, one driven by obsession, delusion, and old romantic wounds that refused to heal. Patty Williams re-emerged with all the unsettling intensity that has always followed her, determined to convince Billy Abbott that she was no longer the dangerous woman people remembered. Patty spoke as though she had transformed into someone entirely new, someone worthy of trust and understanding. But Billy saw through the performance almost immediately. He knew Patty's history too well to simply accept her claims of rehabilitation, and skepticism lingered heavily between them throughout their encounter. Still, Patty pressed forward with unwavering determination, desperate to reshape how people viewed her, while subtly revealing that her feelings for Jack Abbott had never truly disappeared. The conversation quickly shifted toward Diane Jenkins Abbott, and Patty wasted no time attacking Diane's place in Jack's life, with bitter resentment simmering beneath every word. To Patty, Diane was never worthy of Jack's love, never worthy of the life she had managed to build beside him, and Patty's jealousy made that painfully clear. Beneath her attempts to appear stable and reformed, the old obsession still burned fiercely, and Billy could sense it with alarming clarity. The atmosphere between Billy and Patty grew increasingly uncomfortable as Patty attempted to manipulate him into supporting her cause. She wanted Billy to believe she deserved another chance, not only from society, but from Jack himself. Patty's hope of reclaiming Jack's heart lingered behind every carefully chosen word, and she even tried nudging Billy toward putting in a good word for her. But Billy wasn't fooled. Years of chaos and emotional damage had taught him exactly how dangerous Patty's fixation could become, and no amount of pleading could erase that history from his mind. Even as Patty tried wrapping herself in the image of redemption, Billy remained guarded, unconvinced that her transformation was genuine. The tension in their interaction created an uneasy feeling, as though the past itself was threatening to rise from the grave all over again. And just when it seemed Patty's emotional campaign couldn't become any more unpredictable, fate prepared another shocking twist in her path. At some point during the unfolding chaos, Patty found herself in a surprising encounter with Matt Clark, a moment that instantly raised questions about what could happen next. The meeting carried the feeling of a dangerous spark reigniting in secret, hinting that larger complications were quietly beginning to form beneath the surface. Genoa City has always been a place where old connections return at the worst possible moments, and Patty crossing paths with Matt had all the signs of another unpredictable chapter about to begin. The emotional instability surrounding Patty already made every scene involving her feel volatile, but introducing Matt into the equation threatened to make things even more explosive. There was an eerie sense that unfinished business and buried emotions were slowly pulling multiple lives toward collision once again. While Billy walked away unconvinced by Patty's desperate attempt to reinvent herself, the uncertainty surrounding her future only deepened. And elsewhere, amid fear and emotional turmoil, another storyline began offering a fragile glimpse of hope. Across town, Kane Ashby stood ready to risk everything for Lily Winters, proving just how far he was willing to go for the woman he still loved. The situation surrounding Malcolm Winters' transplant had become increasingly urgent, and Kane's willingness to step forward as a bone marrow donor revealed the depth of his commitment. Dr. Stephanie Simmons had already approved Kane as Malcolm's donor in Genoa City, but Lily still felt more comfortable moving forward with the procedure in New York, just as originally planned. That decision, however, came with enormous consequences. Kane was currently bound by strict bail conditions, and traveling to New York would mean violating those rules and potentially putting his freedom at serious risk. Yet when it came to Lily and her family, Kane appeared completely prepared to make that sacrifice without hesitation. His willingness to jeopardize everything spoke volumes about the feelings that still existed between them, feelings that had survived heartbreak, distance, and countless complications over the years. As Lily looked at Kane, she likely saw not only the mistakes of the past, but also the man standing before her now, loyal, determined, and willing to risk his future for the people she loved most. The emotional walls between them continued to crumble with every vulnerable moment they shared. What began as support during a crisis was slowly evolving into something much deeper, something undeniably romantic. The chemistry between them became impossible to ignore, and the growing closeness hinted that their long journey back to each other might finally be nearing a turning point. The possibility of a passionate kiss lingered heavily in the air, carrying the promise of rekindled love after years of emotional scars and unfinished feelings. In the middle of so much pain, addiction, manipulation, and uncertainty, Lily and Kane represented a rare thread of hope. Two people cautiously rediscovering the connection that once defined their lives. And as Genoa City continued spinning through chaos and heartbreak, their emotional reunion offered the possibility that even after devastating loss and endless complications, love might still find a way to survive. As the night stretched deeper over Genoa City, the emotional aftershocks of every secret and confession continued spreading through the lives tangled together in this growing storm. Nikki Newman left her conversation with Jack Abbott carrying a mixture of relief and dread, because while finally sharing the truth about Nick's addiction eased the crushing isolation she had been living with, it also forced her to confront how fragile her son's future truly was. Every step she took seemed heavier now, weighed down by terrifying possibilities that refused to leave her mind. She knew addiction could destroy even the strongest people, and Nick had already been pushed to emotional limits few could survive untouched. Jack's support gave her comfort, but comfort alone could not guarantee Nick's recovery. Somewhere in the distance, Nick continued walking the dangerous line between healing and relapse, and the uncertainty surrounding him cast a shadow over everyone who loved him. The tragedy of addiction was not only what it did to the person suffering, but how it slowly consumed entire families with fear, helplessness, and sleepless nights. Nick's inner turmoil intensified as temptation continued clawing at him from every direction, turning even quiet moments into emotional battlegrounds. The cravings never truly disappeared. They lingered beneath the surface like a relentless whisper waiting for weakness to appear. Every memory of pain, every ounce of stress, every emotional wound threatened to drag him back toward the very thing he was trying to escape. There were moments when recovery felt possible, moments when he could almost imagine reclaiming the life that addiction had stolen from him. But then the darkness returned, heavy and suffocating, reminding him how easy it would be to give in. The isolation surrounding his struggle became unbearable at times, because even though people cared deeply about him, no one could fully enter the nightmare unfolding inside his mind. And while Nick fought to hold himself together, Nikki silently feared that one devastating decision could change everything forever. Meanwhile, Patty Williams remained consumed by her obsession with rewriting the narrative of her life, refusing to accept that the people around her still saw danger beneath her carefully constructed image of redemption. Her encounter with Billy Abbott left her frustrated, because no matter how passionately she insisted she had changed, Billy continued looking at her through the lens of her troubled past. Yet Patty refused to surrender her fantasy of reclaiming Jack Abbott. In her mind, Diane Jenkins Abbott represented everything unfair about the life Patty believed should have belonged to her. The bitterness in Patty's voice whenever Diane's name surfaced revealed wounds that had never healed, wounds fueled by jealousy, rejection, and years of emotional instability. She painted herself as misunderstood, as someone who simply loved too deeply, while casting Diane as unworthy of Jack's devotion. But beneath her emotional pleas and fragile smiles, there remained an unsettling intensity that made it impossible to fully trust her transformation. Billy could sense that intensity growing stronger the longer Patty spoke, and the conversation left him increasingly disturbed. He knew manipulation when he saw it, and Patty's attempts to pull him into her corner felt dangerously familiar. She wanted validation. She wanted allies. More than anything, she wanted another path back into Jack's heart, no matter how unrealistic that dream seemed. Billy understood that Patty's obsession had the potential to spiral again, and he had no intention of encouraging fantasies that could reopen old wounds for everyone involved. Even so, Patty continued pressing forward with desperate determination, clinging to the belief that people would eventually see her differently. The tragic part was that somewhere beneath the instability, Patty likely did crave love, acceptance, and peace. But years of emotional chaos had twisted those desires into something volatile and unpredictable, leaving everyone around her questioning how long it would be before another explosion shattered the fragile calm she was trying so hard to project. Then came the unexpected moment that shifted the atmosphere around Patty even further, her surprising encounter with Matt Clark. The tension surrounding that meeting carried immediate intrigue, as though two forgotten pieces of Genoa City's complicated past had suddenly collided again. There was something deeply unsettling about the timing, especially with Patty already emotionally vulnerable and increasingly fixated on Jack Abbott. Matt's appearance felt less like coincidence and more like the beginning of another unpredictable chain reaction waiting to unfold. Their interaction hinted at hidden layers still buried beneath the surface, unresolved emotions and dangerous possibilities quietly awakening all over again. In a city where history never truly stays buried, encounters like these rarely end without consequences. And as Patty stepped further into uncertain emotional territory, the risk of chaos seemed to grow with every passing moment. Yet, amid the tension and heartbreak dominating Genoa City, Kane Ashby and Lily Winters found themselves moving towards something unexpectedly hopeful. The transplant crisis surrounding Malcolm Winters forced both of them to confront feelings they had tried to keep buried for far too long. Kane's willingness to violate his bail conditions and risk his own freedom for Lily's family spoke louder than any grand romantic speech ever could. It was an act of loyalty, sacrifice, and love wrapped together in one impossible decision. Lily saw the seriousness in his eyes when he made it clear that he would go to New York if she wanted him to, regardless of the consequences waiting for him afterward. That level of devotion broke through emotional walls she had carefully built over time, reminding her of the man she once trusted with her whole heart. The connection between them deepened with every vulnerable conversation, every shared glance filled with years of pain, forgiveness, and unfinished love. As they prepared for the uncertain road ahead, the emotional closeness between Lily and Kane became undeniable. The fear surrounding Malcolm's condition created urgency, but it also stripped away distractions and forced honesty into the open. Kane no longer seemed interested in hiding how deeply he still cared for Lily, and she found herself slowly lowering her guard in response. Their chemistry reignited naturally, built not on fantasy, but on history, sacrifice, and genuine emotional understanding. A kiss between them no longer felt like a distant possibility. It felt inevitable, like two people finally allowing themselves to stop fighting what had always existed between them. For Lily, the growing reunion carried both hope and risk, because reopening her heart meant reopening old scars as well. But for the first time in a long while, there was warmth beginning to emerge through the uncertainty, offering a rare emotional light in the middle of Genoa City's growing darkness. And so, while addiction threatened to pull Nick Newman deeper into despair, while Patty Williams drifted dangerously close to obsession once more, and while secrets continued tightening around the powerful families of Genoa City, another story quietly began rising through the chaos, the story of two people rediscovering love when they least expected it. Kane and Lily's growing bond became a reminder that even after betrayal, heartbreak, and years apart, some connections refuse to disappear completely. In a world filled with emotional wreckage and painful choices, their reunion carried the possibility of healing. But in Genoa City, hope never arrives without complications, and every step toward happiness is often shadowed by the threat of another devastating twist waiting just around the corner. By the time dawn threatened the edges of Genoa City once again, the emotional pressure surrounding its most powerful families had become almost unbearable. Every secret seemed ready to erupt. Every fragile relationship balanced dangerously close to collapse. And beneath the polished surface of wealth and influence, fear continued spreading like wildfire. Nikki Newman could no longer escape the haunting reality that her son's life was hanging by a thread. Even after confiding in Jack Abbott, the terror remained lodged deep inside her heart, because addiction was not an enemy defeated overnight. It was patient, cruel, and relentless. Nikki understood that recovery came with setbacks, temptations, and devastating moments of weakness, and the uncertainty surrounding Nick's condition left her emotionally exhausted. The image of her son fighting invisible demons tormented her endlessly, and no amount of strength or experience could shield a mother from that kind of pain. Meanwhile, Nick Newman's struggle intensified behind closed doors, where silence often became more dangerous than chaos itself. Every passing hour tested his resolve, as the cravings tightened around him like chains he could barely break free from. The fentanyl addiction had carved deep emotional scars into him, leaving him vulnerable to hopelessness in ways he never imagined possible. There were moments when he stared into the emptiness around him and questioned whether he truly had the strength to keep fighting. Recovery demanded brutal honesty, patience, and endurance, but Nick was emotionally drained from carrying so much pain for so long. The temptation waiting for him was always there, whispering promises of escape from the crushing weight of guilt, fear, and exhaustion. Yet somewhere beneath the darkness, a small part of him still wanted to survive, still wanted to believe there was a future waiting beyond the nightmare consuming him. Jack Abbott remained deeply affected after Nicky's heartbreaking confession, because Nick's battle forced him to revisit painful memories of his own struggles. He knew better than most how addiction could dismantle a person piece by piece, while convincing them they were beyond saving. Jack's compassion for Nicky came from genuine understanding, and he recognized how terrified she truly was, despite her attempts to remain composed. In many ways, Jack became a lifeline for her during this crisis, someone capable of offering guidance without judgment. But even as he focused on supporting Nicky and worrying about Nick's future, Another emotional complication continued creeping closer to his life, one he likely didn't yet realize was becoming increasingly dangerous. Patty Williams's fixation on him was far from over, and her determination seemed to grow stronger with every rejection and every obstacle standing in her way.